أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم، وإذا أراد الله بقوم سوءا فلا مرد له، وما لهم من دونه من وال. One prevailing question that is in the mind of many observers, that is the extent and nature of the commemoration of Ashuraa memory. In many people's minds is that why the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam would commemorate the tragedy of Ashuraa in such somber and sad mood. No matter how was the victim or the victims of that tragic incident have been brutalized and murdered, yet it is unexplainable, or it cannot be explained the way that the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam will commemorate it in such sad and somber mood. Yet if you look carefully, and this is according to them, that the followers of Ahlul Bayt, they are to be very odd and strange in their commemoration. Why? Because when you look at other people and how they commemorate or celebrate other personalities, their own legends, let's say, their important personalities and figures, you see that they celebrate them in a very joyous mode, not in anguish, not in sorrow. They basically, even let's say that personality has been martyred, killed, brutally killed, they celebrate his birthday in order to, to give him importance, and his ideas that are considered to be important, they celebrate his birthday, not the day that he was martyred and killed. The followers of Ahlul Bayt, they have very strange tradition. That's in the mind of many people, and sometimes even in the mind of the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. That's why do we commemorate Ashuraa? When comes the birthday of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to be, very precise, some of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, they don't even know the date of his, birthday. So why is it so? To answer this, brothers and sisters, we need to look at the objective of the revolution of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. In a very simple word, what did the Imam want to achieve? What was his intention? We cannot study the intention of the Imam unless we go to his writings and his words. Through his words, writings, and actions, it becomes clear to us the objective of the Imam. Just to make things simple, I refer to the famous writing that he had to his brother, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. In that writing, he says this. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما. The reason that I have this uprising is not just to cause havoc in society or be an arrogant or to be a tyrant and be an irresponsible person. No. إنما وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي محمد. The reason that I have this uprising is simplified in single word, and that is reformation. Reformation of the nation of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So the question comes like this. If the Imam was successful in his revolution, how would the nation would have changed? How would it affect the status of the nation? We cannot answer this question unless we have a close look at the history of the nation, Islamic nation. What has happened to this nation from the very beginning until now? That is the whole study. Tonight, brothers and sisters, my talk will be dedicated toward the rise and the fall or decline of Muslim Ummah, Muslim nation, or you can put it as a Muslim empire. After that, we will see what the Imam alayhi salam tried to achieve on the battle of Ashuraa. Had the people have listened to him, has implemented his reformations, probably we would not be in the place that our nation, as it is now, in its place. That will be said after your loud salawat. You see, Islam as a civilization have been considered one of the most, or probably the most, progressive, advanced, and most tolerant civilization that the face of this planet has ever seen. Basically, Islam is considered to be this. It's considered to be a religion and a civilization. Has two meanings. When you talk to a historian and you say Islam, he tells you immediately, what are you talking about? A religion of Islam or a civilization of Islam? That has made Islam unique. You cannot find any other civilization that has those two meanings. Meaning a civilization, only a civilization. Chinese civilization, for example. Roman civilization. Greek civilization. Western civilization. Has nothing to do with faith and religiosity. But when it comes to Islam, it has both. For example, you say Christian, but you can't say Christian civilization or Jewish civilization. They all have a meaning of a religion. But when it comes to Islam, Islam is a coterminous with civilization. What does that tell you? It tells you that Islam is so dynamic that can play in both roles, as a religion and as a civilization. So if you go back centuries ago, and specifically at the 8th century, you will see that Islam has advanced to become the most advanced empire or culture or civilization. The most tolerant civilization on the face of the planet. When did this one start? The historians say that was back in 819, meaning 819. And specifically in the city of Baghdad, where the Khalifa, the king at the time, Al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi, has established this institute that is called the House of Wisdom, Baytul Hikmah. When he established this institute, he established it for two reasons. Number one is to find all the ancient work of the Greek civilization, which is basically was full of philosophy. Find any work that the Greeks have produced, translated to Arabic. What he did, he appointed a scholar, a polymath, who happened to be Hunayn ibn Ishaq. Hunayn was a Christian. He was not even a Muslim. he made him to head this institute with an army of scholars, scientists, naturalists, philosophers, and have asked them to translate books of the Greeks. Now, every one of them would end up finishing a translation of one book. The Khalifa will take that book, weigh the book, whatever the weight is, he will pay in the same amount of weight in gold to that scholar. This is how he used to reward the scientist. So the first purpose of creating such kind of institute is to translate all the Greek work. And the second purpose of that, it is that to form an advisory body that will send, raise the issues to the Khalifa, and the Khalifa will work accordingly. You've heard of the National Security Council here in the US? It looks like this, meaning whatever issue pertains to security, either a scientific, social, political, those group of scientists who happen to be Christians, Jews, and Muslims would give their advice to the Khalifa, and the Khalifa will act accordingly. Now, within less than a century, Islamic culture was filled with plenty of artists, poets, philosophers, physicians, mathematicians, chemists, astronomers, and you name it. That was within less than 100 of years. Now, when you look carefully, you see what has triggered this kind of flourishing and advancements of science. It was basically the work of the Greeks. The Muslims have taken the work of the Greeks, translated it, analyzed it, comprehended, and utilized it for their own advantage. But when you look at Europe, the Christendom at that time, at the 8th century or so, you will see that it was swamped in darkness and barbarianism. Why? What was the reason? Again, historians say, for this very strong fact, is that the Europeans bypassed Greek work. They did not give it any attention. They completely considered that work of Greek philosophers is nothing but rubbish. They completely kept themselves isolated from the work of a Greek. Now, if you ask, why did they do this? Is due to religious fundamentalism. Aristotle, I'm not going to go deep into philosophy, but what Aristotle did, he emphasized on the material life, on material reality, and has emphasized on perishable soul. Basically, he said that soul is made of matter. Now, whatever we see in this universe, in this life, it is real. There is nothing behind it. Now, that stay at contrast to the religious teachings. But the Christians shut themselves from that. Completely, they isolated themselves from that. Muslims could have done the same thing, but they did not. They took that one. They translated into Arabic. They comprehended it and analyzed it. Whatever that worked for their advantage, they used it. Whatever was rubbish, they threw it away. Therefore, they could see the incredible use of Aristotle's work. Therefore, they used it in science, they used it in math, they used it in philosophy. Therefore, all they have advanced. Here, I would like to stop on each single example that I told you. How Muslim nation or Muslim culture have advanced. After your salawat. The first field in science that flourished was medicine. Medicine, in the 7th century of Europe, that was only in the form of certain hospitals. Surgery was abandoned was banned, basically, by the church. It was prohibited for anyone to perform surgery at that time in Europe. Many of those medical institutes have been closed by the order of the emperor due to religious decree from the Pope. Those institutes have been closed. What happened is that hospitals opened in the Islamic territory. The first modern hospital in which people get treated, patients get treated, and surgery is done was in the 9th century. It was in the city called Jundi Shapur. It is in southern Iran right now. You know where Ahwaz and the rest of other cities? That was in 805. The first modern hospital have been established. Now, after that, first modern pharmacy also opened in Baghdad. And after that, many hospitals all flourished in the Islamic territory. Now, those physicians who happened to be polymath, meaning philosophers, physicians, and mathematicians, who were in Europe, they all abandoned Europe and moved to the Islamic territory. They migrated to Islamic nation to be there. There are some, personalities, some outstanding personalities in Islamic medicine. We have to mention their name. One of them is Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi. This guy, who was born in 854, who again happened to be a polymath, a physician, chemist, and other things, he only has written 200 books and articles. Now, he was the first one to differentiate between smallpox and measles. Now, in Baghdad, they told him, establish a hospital. Find a place to build the hospital. What he did, he grabbed pieces of meat, scraps of meat, and hacked them somewhere in different parts of the city. By time, the scrap of meat becomes what? Rotten. So after a while, he went and checked which area in which that scrap of meat have been rotten the least. He picked it and made the hospital there. Why would meat rotten? It's due to the bacterial, fungi, and things like that, to pathogens. So in a place that has the least amount of pathogen would be very suitable for a hospital. He established, the hospital there. Now, he was accredited with formulating alcohol. Alcohol was formulated by this physician. He wrote his masterpiece that is called Al-Judari wal-Hasba. This book, first of all, have been translated into Latin later on. And there have been 40 times that it has been reprinted, meaning 40 editions, were in Europe only, and have been taught from 1498 up to 1866, almost 350 years. The academic institutes in Europe, in the West, used to teach this book of Zakaria al-Razi. The second physician, as many of you know, his name is Al-Hussein Abu Ali ibn Sina. Ibn Sina, also in his book called Canon of Medicine, who has summed up all the existing medical knowledge. He wrote at that time, he wrote this one and emphasized on something at that time extraordinary. Nobody has, ever thought of this. He said that any drug that you make, number one, test it on animals. Nowadays, you cannot take, when you go to the pharmacy and take any tablets, any medicine, this medicine has not reached your hand before it has been tested on animals. Now, Abu Ali Sina, 900 years ago, has predicted this and has told that in order to find the efficacy of a medicine, go and test it on the animals. Now, his book, the Canon, was translated into Latin and had 30 editions. Now, this book was taught from 12th century up to 17th century, basically 500 years. In the highest ranking academic institutes in Europe, this book have been, been taught. Now, one Italian surgeon has written this book, which was very well known in the medieval time in Europe. The book is called The Surgery of Roland of Parma. It explains different techniques of surgeries. Now, talks about many techniques. If you guys know, the father of medicine is considered to be a Greek physician called Hippocrates. Hippocrates, up to now, any doctor would want to graduate, he has to take the oath of Hippocrates. He has to take this oath. He is considered to be the father of medicine. Now, this guy who has written this book, The Surgery of Roland of Parma, who is Rolandus, in one of the techniques in these surgeries, he has depicted a picture of Hippocrates teaching his students of a specific act. How did he depict this one? How did he do the portrait? He portrayed Hippocrates, who is a Greek, portrayed him wearing an Arab dress with a turban. What does that tell you? Tells you that the essence of medicine, the spirit of medicine, lies in the Islamic Arab culture. That was back in the medieval time. This is about medicine. About chemistry, I will just point to the word that Will Durant. Will Durant is one of the great historians, he's from, I guess, from Detroit, from Michigan, who has written an extensive, encyclopedia. It's called The Story of Civilization. Talks about all kinds of civilizations, including Muslim civilization. In his book, he says that chemistry as a science was almost created by Muslims. It were Muslims who have created, the science of chemistry. They introduced a precise observation. You see, before, this kind of observation that is now used in any kind of scientific methodology, it was not before. It was established by Muslim scientists. In that observation, you need to make, if you are performing an experiment on a certain thing, you have to have a control experiment. Control experiment meaning it is a parallel experiment that is done exactly the same except the area of your testing. That is how you will come up to see the efficacy of that experiment, the success of that experiment. That was established by Muslim scientists and Muslim, chemists. They have investigated many of the chemicals and the drugs. I will mention only one chemist name. We have a long list and we need to cover all of them. One of them is called Jabir ibn Hayyan al-Ju'fi. Jabir ibn Hayyan was a legend in chemistry. He is considered to be the father of chemistry. Look what he invented. Those techniques that I'm going to be naming, they are lively and up to date and used in every single institute, every single university. Go to any chemistry department or organic chemistry department and ask about those techniques. This gentleman has, innovated those techniques. What are those? He innovated crystallization, calcination, distillation, filtration, purification, liquefaction, and evaporation. Those are different kinds of techniques that are used in any chemistry department in any major university. This guy, Jabir ibn Hayyan, has established the protocol for those. He also has discovered the synthesis of those two materials, two acids, hydrochloric acid and nitric acid. The way that he has formulated it, it is used exactly nowadays. Exact in the same way that Jabir ibn Hayyan used to make. There is interesting that in his book, he has written a book of alchemy. He starts this book with this sentence. He says, حدثني مولاي Jafar ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq. He says that my master has taught me the following, and then he mentions the name of Jafar ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. In mathematics, I'm just going to be mentioning some names. Umar al-Khayyam. Umar al-Khayyam, he accurately calculated the length of the solar year. You see the solar year, which is 365 days. to the 6th decimal. This is it. He calculated a complete year to be 365.242198 days. Umar al-Khayyam, 500 years ago. Abu Rayhan al-Biruni has estimated the circumference of our planet, Earth. But he was only 50 miles off. Only 50 miles shorter than what's the real one, the established one that is now on record. Nasir ad-Din al-Tusi originated the law of conservation of energy. He was in the 11th century. Now in 18th century, there was a French philosopher. His name is Anton Lavoisier. If you check the internet, Google search, it tells you that he was, this French scholar, was the one who has, come up with this law. It's called the law of conservation of energy. Then, later on, as you Google search, in the Wikipedia says that is disputable, because Nasir ad-Din al-Tusi, 700 years before, in his writing has established this law of conservation of energy. Now, Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham was accredited with finding optics. Those of you who are wearing eyeglasses and contact lenses, they should be thankful. They should send their salawat and their Surah Al-Fatiha to his soul. He was the one who was accredited with finding the optic lenses. When was that? 600 years ago, when he established this one. Now let's talk about the universities. When you check for the first university in Europe or in the Western civilization, Western hemisphere in general, they tell you the first university is Oxford University. Still, they don't have an exact date. They tell you that it is sometimes in the 12th century, in later part of the 12th century. But according to Guinness Book of World Records, when you check it to find the first university, it tells you the first modern university where you can get a degree in bachelor and master and doctorate. That's according to the Guinness Book of Records. It says that the first university was established in Morocco, specifically in Fas, and called the University of Qarawiyun. When was that? That was in 859. 859. The first university that was established. 300 years before Oxford, Islamic territory had their own first university. Later on, in 1975, Al-Azhar, the University of Azhar in Cairo have been established. Now, all of you who attend college, at the graduation party, what do you do? What kind of a dress you wear? The long robes, right? Those long robes, where do those long robes come from? Those long robes are adopted from the robes that an alim wears. You know what an alim, a religious scholar, wears? If you look, you will see the similarity between those two. Now, what is the proper name for a graduate? Someone who graduates from a university. What is it called? If anybody knows. What is the word for someone who graduates from college? Come on, how many college students we have here? Alumni. Perfect. What is the root of alumni? The root of alumni is alim, scientist. That has taken from Arabic. The word Arabic, alumni. This is how it is described. Now, some of the libraries in Cordoba, in southern Spain, the libraries, there were 70 libraries in Cordoba alone. The largest one had 600,000 books. In Cairo, they were 2 million books. In Tripoli, they were 3 million books. I would doubt nowadays in Tripoli there are 1 million books. But at that time, 700 years ago, they were 3 million books. Now, compared with the with Europe at that time. Europe had a very famous library that is called the Library of Abbey of Saint Gall in Switzerland. How many books it had? 360 books, compared to 3 million of books in Tripoli and Cairo. This is how many books and libraries we had. Now, if you want to talk about agriculture, for example, Muslims have invented a technique called the crop rotation system. What is a crop rotation system? They tell you in one area, first crop something, plant some sort of a plant. Next season, don't do the same. Do something else. The next time, in the third season, again, crop something else. Why? Because if you keep cropping the same plant over and over again, pathogens, bacteria will start to grow in that land. But as you change it, you keep the land fertile, number one, and safe from the pathogens. Again, this technique is used nowadays in the modern West. Now, other techniques, market economy. Look at those terms that have been invented by Muslims, such as a credit, debit, profit, revenue, checks, promissory notes, saving accounts. And, by the way, money could be promised in Baghdad, meaning that someone go and deposit money into an institute in a bank, and he can collect the money later on in Andalusia, in Spain. I doubt nowadays someone can deposit money in Baghdad and collect it in Spain. Not only in Spain, maybe in Damascus he cannot. But imagine 700 years ago, people could transfer money in this way. And eventually, rock and roll. Rock and roll, who happens to be the West's greatest cultural export. It is an American icon when you see the guitar. Guitar is considered to be an American icon. Have you checked its root? Or where is it coming from? Guitar is coming from the word called qithara. Qithara is an Arabic word for guitar. It has been introduced to Europe, and then from Europe to America through Andalusia. This is how Muslims have contributed to all those things. That was all the glory in the past. What do we have now? That's the important thing, brothers and sisters. Those were all something belonged to the past. Nowadays, unfortunately, if you look at Islam, not only they don't talk to as it's a civilization, nor as a religion, rather Islam has been reduced to a term called terrorism, associated with terrorism. Now, if you look at this view in the West, it tells you that Islam is worthy of nothing. Don't waste your time. There is nothing you can learn from this thing that is called Islam. It's all barbarianism, all backwardness, and against humanity. Pick any history book in high school. Grab any history textbook in high school and read it. What do you see? Probably the only Muslim name that you find in it is the Prophet Muhammad's name. Would you find any other name? And if you see the portrait next to that chapter, what kind of portrait you will see? You will see nomads riding camels in the middle of nowhere in some hot desert. This is what you get when they depict Islamic culture. Why, brothers and sisters? It is just because they hate us? Is it because they are so jealous of us? You see, I cannot minimize their guilt, but we also should ask, ourselves. What has happened? Unfortunately, nowadays, Muslims on the educational track, they are very backward. On scientific track, they are very marginal. On political track, they are insignificant. And financially, terribly poor. Here are some statistics. When you check, I told you the first university was in Islamic territory. Now you ask, okay, how many How many universities available? In the entire Muslim countries, 57 countries. We have little more than 500 universities. How many universities are in the US? Only US. More than 5,000 universities. Now the entire Muslim countries, 57 countries, they have less than 500 universities. India has 800 universities. Now, if you want to look at the GDP, how much people make in the West, and that is according to the survey back in 1999. It tells you in the West, the GDP is $25,000, while this is the average, of course. In the Islamic world, it is less than $1,000. The average is less than $1,000. This is how we have progressed. At a time that the Islamic empire could fight 3 different battlegrounds, 3 different fronts, and could win them all back in the 17th century, in the beginning of 18th century, the heart of this Islamic land, which was Egypt, have been captured by a tiny, small squadron of French, French Navy, by a commander called Napoleon. He came and captured the heart of Muslim empire. Now, after decades, this occupying power was forced to leave. But it was not forced by the inhabitants, by the Muslims. Rather, by the Royal Navy of the British Empire. They came and kicked the French occupiers, and they have occupied it. You will see big countries like Indonesia have been captured by tiny, small country like Netherlands, by Portugal. What has happened? What did go wrong? All of a sudden, from that peak, from that summit all the way to the bottom, what has gone wrong? You see, brothers and sisters, there are 3 analyses, 3 viewpoints. Tell you the reason that Islam went into decline. You see, we need to connect it to the revolution of Imam Hussein to see why this has happened. The first viewpoint tell you the problem is simple. It is within a word that consists of 5 letters. And that word is Islam itself. The problem is Islam. The position of religion in this culture. It is this one that has caused the decline in Muslims. Why? Because صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Because if you see that Islamic religion is full of canonic laws. Very strict and rigid laws and regulations. Very stiff. They're not elastic. You cannot compromise on those. Those are based on Sharia. This kind of laws stay at stark contrast to modernity, to advancement. Once you remove those kind of laws, you come up with a good way of interpretation of your scriptures, at that time you will be advancing. But as long as those canonic laws exist in the territory and people uphold to those, then you will not see any progress. The detrimental factor, it is those laws. It is this Islam. And this religion is always with you. You go to the bedroom, he is with you. You go to the bathroom, he is with you. At the school, he is with you. At the market, he is with you. He doesn't abandon you. He doesn't give you a break. You need to focus on your individuality, on your freedom. If you cannot have a freedom, then you cannot achieve modernity. The problem is the position of your religion. The minute that you do in exactly the same way as the European scholars did in their Renaissance, in their time of enlightenment, when they captured their religion and put it within the confinement of 4 walls of the church and tell him, we will see you once a day on Sunday, at that time you will progress. Otherwise, do not even think of a progress. You will not see such kind of progress, because we as Europeans, have gone through exact same experiment. We had the church who decide on our fates. Everything that comes, he says, no, this is haram. This is illegal. This is bad. This is decadence, full of decadence. This is indecent, and abolishing everything. Eventually, we managed to capture this church and locked it within the confinement of its walls. Therefore, whenever you end up separating between the mosque and the state and your affairs, at that time you will succeed. Other than that, you cannot do anything. What is the answer to this? The answer is simple, brothers and sisters. If we consider that Islam was the source of a trouble, then let's go back to those scholars. Those scholars who advanced in science and technology and modernity at that time, they were all adherent to their religion. Their religion was the source of aspiration. The religion gave them inspiration and energy to go and check and find out and come up with new ideas and invent things. Those were very close than us to the source of their religion. If Islam were bad, how did it advance at first place? At first place, we say that Islam as a civilization. We didn't say Arab civilization or Persian civilization. We said Islamic civilization. What does Islamic civilization mean? Means that this religion was the source of inspiration. It was the source that gave the scientists a dose of energy to go and search and find. Therefore, it cannot be, the same religion cannot be a source of obstacle. It cannot be an obstacle in front of modernity and science and new technology. It cannot be a religion that starts its revelation to its prophet with those 5 verses. What are those 5 verses? The first verse that our prophet have ever heard was this: اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read. A religion that emphasizes on reading cannot be a source of obstacle, causing trouble, causing backwardness. You see, Quran came to say read. Always, as you check Quran and Islamic literature, always pushes people toward what? Learning. Learning more. وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Get more knowledge. The Prophet, peace be upon him, says, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ وَمُسْلِمَةٍ. It's mandatory, it's incumbent for everyone to seek knowledge, regardless of their gender or their age. This religion cannot be a source of backwardness, and it stops people from advancing. You see, in the Battle of Badr, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, captured many of those pagans of Mecca, you know, in the battle between Muslims and pagans, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said to those, we will release you provided that you teach every Muslim. If you can teach Muslims how to read and write, then we will set you free. You see, a prophet like this, a religion like this, that tells and, you know, admonish its followers to seek knowledge, to seek learning, cannot be an obstacle for progression. Therefore, this is not a valid argument. The second view, brothers and sisters, is just the opposite of the first, you know, argument. What does the second view say? It says the problem of Islam and Islamic culture, it is those invaders. Those intruders who were jealous, who were resentful to Muslims, who could not see Muslim advance, they barbarically attacked them. When they attacked them, they destroyed Muslim cities. By the way, they destroyed their cultures, their academic institutions. Therefore, it was a great setback to them. For example, the Crusaders, back in 1099, they have attacked Jerusalem. Only within 2 days, they have killed more than 40,000 innocent lives. Jew and Muslims. Many of those happened to be scholars. scientists. Many were having, academic institute. But they have killed them, it was a big massacre. Again, the second wave of invasion was on the hand of Mongols. Mongols came all the way from East Asia and they attacked the Muslim empire. Remember I said that the House of Wisdom was where? If you remember. Where was House of Wisdom at the beginning? Where? Perfect. Alhamdulillah. There is at least one person is listening to me carefully. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. When the Mongols entered Baghdad, what did they do? They set that institute, the House of Wisdom, to fire. They destroyed the library of Baghdad. They killed more than 100,000 people. Now they kept advancing until they reached a place called Ain Jalut, close to Egypt, after many years. In that battle, they were defeated. But what? On the expense of Islamic society. It was Islam who preserved Europe. If Muslim community has not stopped Mongols from advancing, Mongols will take it all the way to Europe. They would have destroyed Europe. They have changed Europe to barbarianism. But they didn't. It was the Muslim society who stopped the barbarian Mongols. Therefore, Europe was kept preserved with its academic institutions, with its scholars. Therefore, it were the Mongols who kept the problem. And eventually, it was those colonial superpowers who came and invaded us. One day, every time, in a specific name. Sometimes through market, sometimes through advancement of democracy, sometimes searching for nuclear weapon and mass, destruction weapon. They come and invade us and destroy us. Just in the time that Portugal came and, took many lands in Muslim territories between 1576 to 1650s, they have looted 200 tons of gold. 200 tons of gold they have, been looting, which was equal to $2.8 billion if you want to calculate it today. The Spaniards also did the same thing. They looted worth of $3.3 billion of silver, and they imported it into Seville. This is how they plundered the wealth of Muslims, and they left Muslims have nothing. In the revolution of Algeria, the Algerian people lost more than 1 million people due to the French occupation. This much, Muslim territory and Muslim culture has lost. If it were not those occupations, Muslims have, been saved. Again, brothers and sisters, this is not the correct answer. Why? Because Muslims were weak, then they were invaded. Not because they were invaded and they became weak. You see, it is natural for anyone to place his misfortunes on the shoulder of others. Blame others for his own mishaps and his, misfortunes. Seeing his weakness, but not accepting this weakness. Always attributing his weakness to the other people. It is others who have kept us, in bad shape. We never admit guilt. You see, brothers and sisters, it's called the theory of the conspiracy theory. Always others are conspiring against us. We are perfect. We don't have any trouble. It is others who have, have come, taken us by surprise, destroying our territories, therefore we lost. But if you check history, brothers and sisters, you see that the most advancement in science in Muslim territory took place after the Mongol occupation. And that was especially the case in Iran, when has caused the emergence of hundreds of scientists due to the fact that Mongols came and occupied Iran. How many countries are under occupation? South Korea was under occupation. China was under occupation. But did you see how they emerged? How they advanced? So it is not the problem of others alone. Yes, we cannot minimize their crimes and their cruelty, but that is not the only cause. It leaves us, brothers and sisters, with the last one, and that is our own brothers and sisters. We have to look at our own. We have to look internally. And that was the purpose of the revolution of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. If you look at Islam, if you look at the words of God, what God has said a perfect principle. God does not advocate anyone except someone who adheres to those principles. God has set a very simple yet a brilliant principle. He said, هَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَّا الْإِحْسَانِ إِنْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ لِأَنفُسِكُمْ وَإِنْ أَسَأْتُمْ فَلَهَا. The product of evil thing is always evil. The product of good thing is always good thing. Islam, when it came with the leadership of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The Prophet, peace be upon him, when he established the society in Medina, what did he do? He made a brotherhood between whom? Between the Ansar, the people of inhabitants of Medina, with those migrants who came all the way from Mecca, who have nothing to own. He grabbed the rich guy and made him a brother of the poor. He has made an egalitarian system where there is no one is more preferred than others based on his belongings or his wealth or his race or his gender. All have been considered equal. He came to advance this kind of notion. Therefore, you see, when the Muslim army would go and invade other territories, the people of those territories would see Islam as a savior, not as an occupier. They immediately embrace the faith of Islam. Why? Because they see the components of Islam as, as modern, progressive, a humanitarian thing. The Prophet, peace be upon him, has said this. It is justice, social justice. If you want to advance, you have to have a social justice. There is a big notion, I don't know whether this is a hadith or not, but it's very well known. It says, الملك يبقى مع العدل الملك يبقى مع الكفر ولا يبقى مع الظلم. Meaning that statehood, ruling, stay with a kafir who happens to be just, but would not stay with someone who is unjust, cruel, and tyrant, even if that person is, Muslim. And that brings us to the fact that Imam Hussein alayhi salam has risen. You see, on the very beginning, when the Prophet has gave those instructions and those lessons to his people, have told them about this and told them, follow. I want you to follow on those instructions. And you know whom to follow? I have left among you my household. It is my household that will take you to victory. إني تارك فيكم الثقلين كتاب الله وعترتي أهل بيتي ما إن تمسكتم بهما لن تضلوا بعدي أبدا. I have left two important, two valuable things among you. First is Quran, and the other one is my household. If you stick to them, you will be victorious. You will never gonna be misguided. But what did happen after him? The Quran says, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلْ انقلبتم على أعقابكم. Muhammad, once Muhammad dies, you will revert back. You will go back again to the same old root of Jahiliyyah, ignorance. Here Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam has very beautiful khutbah sermon. She says that after the Prophet, when there was a coup, what has happened? Why Muslim nation has lost? She said, استبدلوا الذناب بالقوادم. You see, a bird, when a bird flies, it has to have those two wings. Those two wings will take him to the elevations, while the back tail, it brings him down. So Fatima al-Zahra said that for your leadership, and instead of choosing someone who will take you to the highest elevation, you did not. You took someone to bring you back. That's what has happened, brothers and sisters. Therefore, Imam Hussein alayhi salam came to see that I am coming to renew the message of my grandfather. I want to take this ummah to the elevations again. I am coming to free this nation from what has been inflicted, from tyranny, social injustice. That's what Imam Hussein alayhi salam did. On his route to Iraq, he said a very famous statement when he was facing the army of Hur. At that time, he stopped them and told them, look, my mission is this. It's simplified in the narration of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. He said, here, listen to me. I have heard Rasulullah is saying this. مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ سُلْطَانًا جَائِرًا. Whoever of you have seen a despot, a tyrant. He does not mention Yazid. Yazid as a person has no value. Imam Hussein throughout his struggle never mentioned Hussein versus Yazid. He was always saying that someone like me in my position of responsibility will not pledge allegiance to someone like Yazid. This means that in every time, at any era, you see someone like Yazid, you should fight with him. Anytime you see someone like Hussein, you should adhere to him. That's why the hadith says, كل يوم عاشوراء وكل أرض كربلاء. This is an everlasting struggle. Imam Hussein says that, oh people, whoever of you see an unjust rule, what does he do? First of all, ناكثا لعهد الله. He's not, following the rules of God. مُحِلًّا لِحَرَامِ اللَّهِ. God say this is a sanctity. Do not violate this sanctity. But this person violates the sanctity. مُخَالِفًا لِسُنَّةِ نَبِيِّهِ. He goes against the tradition of the Prophet. And this is the important point, brothers and sisters. عَامِلًا فِي عِبَادِ اللَّهِ بِالْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. He subjugates his people. He humiliates his people. At that time, you cannot stop. That's what Imam Hussein alayhi salam did. Even if that has caused his life. Even if that has caused the life of his household. Even if that has caused the life of the 6-month-old baby of his. Why? Because look at the achievement. Today, if Imam Hussein had not sacrificed his life, today, brothers and sisters, you wouldn't have heard the call of adhan. The social justice that Muslims are striving right now to achieve in their countries. It was the blood of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It was the blood of his household. It was the blood of his 6-month-old baby. Imam Hussein, on those last minutes in the battle, as he was to go and say farewell, he comes to his family and calls upon them, Ya Zainab, wa ya Kulthum, wa ya Atikah, wa ya Rabab, alaykunna minni salam. He kept saying farewell to everyone. At that time, Zainab stopped him, told him, now that you are leaving, we have only one request. This baby of you, Abdullah al-Radi', he's dying from thirst. The only thing, just go and ask for water for him. Imam Hussein comes and brings the baby in front of the enemy. You see, the killer was Harmala. Harmala later was caught by Al-Mukhtar. When they brought him, told him, Harmala, describe to us, what did you do on the day of Ashura? He said that I threw 3 arrows. In those 3 arrows, the first one that I hit the eyeballs of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. He could not see, he fell from the ground. The second arrow that I threw, it was on the heart of Hussein. When he left his clothes, his dress, and I saw his heart, I aimed at his heart and hit him. And the last one was Abdullah al-Radi'. But never has hurt me as much as Abdullah al-Radi'. He said that Abdullah was crying. When I aimed at his throat and the arrow penetrated his throat, he smiled and hugged his father. Imam Hussein grabbed the blood and threw it to the heavens. None of the drops came back. Imam Hussein brings the baby to the tent and he says farewell to his family to go to the battlefront. As he's leaving, Zainab stops him, calls upon him, Hussein, come back. I have only one thing to tell you. He comes back. She tells him, step from your horse. He steps from his horse. She says, I have one favor to ask you. I need you to do one thing. What is, Zainab? Please remove the clothes of from your neck. As he does, she prints a kiss right on his neck. Then she looks toward Medina and says, Assalamu alayki ya Ummah, ya Fatima. You have told me to kiss Hussein and I did. Hussein asked her what is going on. She told him that on the last day of the life of our mother told me, look Zainab, one day you will see your brother Hussein alone. He's going to the battle. At that time I want you to kiss him right on his neck. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik wa anakhat birahlik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. Everyone, السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.